In the shadowed corridors of a seemingly ordinary D-land home, a story unfolded that would chill the hearts of even the most seasoned crime novel enthusiasts. Michael D. Williams, a man entwined in a domestic web with his ex-wife Marsha Williams, was driven to an unfathomable brink. Their shared history, a tapestry of a decade-long marriage dissolved into a practical but emotionally charged cohabitation, set the stage for a tragedy over something as trivial as electricity usage. The tension in the house, once a sanctuary, is now brimming with silent battles and unspoken resentments. Their agreement to sell the home they once shared as a married couple and split the proceeds seemed simple on the surface. Yet beneath this facade, a storm of grievances was brewing, waiting to erupt. The turning point came with an act that seems almost pedestrian, a disagreement over the use of electricity. Williams, in a moment marred by fury, severed the power to the house. It was more than just flipping a switch. It was an assertion of control, locking the electrical panel and leaving, a move he thought would settle the dispute. But the response from Marsha and her son, Robert Adams, was one of defiance. They broke the lock, restored power, and placed a new lock on the panel, an action that unknowingly ignited a fuse of catastrophic events. When Williams returned, what he found set off a chain reaction. A fiery argument, the culmination of years of suppressed anger and frustration, escalated beyond reason. In a shocking climax of rage, Williams committed the unfathomable. He shot Marsha and Robert, ending their lives in a moment of sheer madness. In his frantic attempt to escape the consequences, Williams called 911, claiming self-defense, a narrative that crumbled like a house of cards under the scrutiny of the authorities. The real victims of this tragic tale, two young children, witnesses to an act too horrific to comprehend, were left to grapple with a reality forever altered. Now, Williams faces the stark reality of his actions, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. A tale that began over something as mundane as a light left on has ended in a dark, irrevocable tragedy, leaving a community and a family shattered in its wake. Background: Marsha Williams and Michael D. Williams, once entwined in a decade-long matrimony, found themselves in the throes of a post-divorce drama, sharing a roof with intentions that were far from harmonious. Their plan, on the surface, seemed practical: sell their shared property and divide the proceeds. Yet, this facade barely concealed the undercurrents of discord that had law enforcement at their doorstep 5 times in a single year. This constant interference by the authorities painted a vivid picture of a relationship steeped in chaos and conflict, far from the peaceful coexistence they might have hoped for. At the heart of their tumultuous interactions lay a seemingly minor issue: electricity usage. Michael's growing ire over what he perceived as reckless consumption was a recurring spark in their volatile environment. It was a mundane matter that, time and again, ignited fierce arguments, fueling the fire of their already strained relationship. The day of the tragedy unfolded with a twist straight out of a crime novel. In an act of extreme frustration, Michael cut off the power to their house, locked the electrical panel, and left, perhaps believing this assertive act would enforce his will. However, upon his return, a scene of defiance met his eyes. Marsha and her son, Robert Adams, had not only broken the lock, but also restored the power and secured the panel with a new lock. This bold countermove was the catalyst for an argument that spiraled out of control, leading to a violent and ultimately tragic confrontation. Michael's ensuing claim of self-defense, where he alleged an attack by Marsha and Robert, was met with skepticism by the authorities. The absence of any physical evidence to support his version of events cast doubt on his account of the altercation. This incident laid bare not just the toxicity that had seeped into their relationship, but also the deep-seated issues, especially the recurrent disputes over something as trivial as electricity, that had plagued their shared living situation. The incident. The relationship between Michael Marsha and her son Robert Adams, fraught with tension and bitterness, continued to deteriorate in the shadow of their dissolved marriage. Their cohabitation, a necessary arrangement rather than a choice, became a breeding ground for conflict, with disputes frequently erupting over various domestic issues, most notably electricity consumption. This seemingly innocuous topic became a symbol of deeper underlying issues, charging the household atmosphere with an ever-present sense of unease. Michael's frustration reached a boiling point over what he perceived as flagrant and excessive use of electricity by Marsha and Robert. In a move that seemed drastic yet in his mind justified, he severed the house's power supply, a symbolic gesture of cutting off not just electricity, but perhaps his lingering ties to a relationship that had long turned sour. He locked the electrical panel and left, perhaps in a futile attempt to assert some control over the situation, or maybe to escape the constant bickering that had become the soundtrack of their lives. However, upon his return, Michael was met with a striking act of defiance. Marsha and Robert, unwilling to succumb to his control and be left in the dark, literally and figuratively, had forcefully removed the lock, reinstated the electricity, and secured the panel with a new lock. This bold act of resistance was more than just a practical solution to the power cut. It was a clear stand against Michael's attempts to dominate, a spark that ignited the powder keg of their volatile relationship. The ensuing confrontation was a cataclysmic explosion of the pent-up anger, resentment, and frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface of their everyday interactions. Overwhelmed by a fury that had its roots in more than just the immediate dispute over electricity, Michael tragically resorted to lethal violence. In a moment of blind rage, he fatally shot both Marsha and Robert, an act that would forever shatter the illusion of normalcy in their household and send shockwaves through the tranquil community of DeLand. The 911 call. As the 8 p.m. hour neared in the otherwise tranquil neighborhood of Daytona Park Estates in DeLand, a chilling 911 call was made. The voice on the other end, belonging to Michael D. Williams, was unnervingly calm as he confessed to a deed that seemed inconceivable. He had shot two people, his ex-wife Marsha Ebanks Williams and her adult son, Robert Adams. What is the root of this tragic outcome? An argument over something as trivial as electricity usage, a dispute that had smoldered and persisted long after the couple's separation. Responding swiftly to this harrowing call, the Volusia Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene, ready to confront the grim reality of Williams's words. They found him seated in a vehicle parked in the driveway, with a disquieting stillness that starkly contrasted with the violence he had just admitted to. Inside the residence, deputies were confronted with a scene that seemed to leap from the pages of a crime novel. The lifeless bodies of Ebanks, Williams, and Adams lay within, turning what was once a home marred by petty disagreements into a solemn crime scene. At the crux of this tragedy was the dispute over electricity, an issue so seemingly insignificant, yet so potent in its ability to provoke conflict. Williams, attempting to assert control in a post-marital cohabitation fraught with tension, had cut off the power and locked the electrical panel. This attempt at dominance was met with a bold act of defiance from Ebanks, Williams, and Adams, who restored the power and replaced the lock, setting the stage for an argument that would escalate into fatal violence. Chief Deputy Brian Henderson, upon assessing the scene and Williams's unscathed appearance, cast doubt on his claim of self-defense. The community, now reeling from the shock of these events, is left to mourn a senseless loss, a tragedy born from what began as a mundane household dispute. Aftermath. In a harrowing episode in DeLand, Florida, 47-year-old Michael D. Williams faces 2 counts of first-degree murder following a domestic dispute that tragically claimed the lives of his ex-wife, Marsha Ebanks Williams, 48, and her son, Robert Adams, 28. The fatal confrontation, sparked by a dispute over electricity consumption, unfolded in a home marred by a history of tension despite the couple's divorce. In a distressing turn, Williams called 911, asserting self-defense in the shooting. Deputies found him in his vehicle, a stark contrast to the grim scene inside the home where Ebanks, Williams, and Adams lay deceased. Adding to the tragedy, Adams's two young children, ages 5 and 6, were present, potentially witnessing the violent act. The couple had a history of discord, evident in police logs detailing verbal disputes, though none had previously escalated to physical violence. The immediate catalyst was a disagreement over an electrical panel. Williams disconnected and locked it, only to find it later restored. This incident underscores how seemingly minor domestic disputes can escalate into devastating violence, with the presence of young children at the scene marking a particularly sorrowful aspect, highlighting the potential for lasting psychological impact.